going to be talking about the elusive topic of work-life balance. Is it a myth or is it something that can be mastered? And I think for years, the narrative has been around trying to find balance between what you do at work to protect your health, productivity and happiness. But is it realistic?
Well, it continues to be an ongoing debate, doesn't it? And it's discussed all the time. It's talked about by leaders espousing the virtues of it, but not necessarily do it themselves always. And I think that, in a lifestyle or a world now where our devices, our phones, our computers, we live in a 24/7 on economy, reachable virtually in every corner of the earth. There is a blurring of the lines, isn't there, between what we do at work and our social life. So those blurring of the lines are very interconnected. And unless we're quite intentional about it, we can find ourselves not achieving the balance we necessarily would like to have.
So we'll look at the work-life balance debate and why that conversation has been increasing in prominence in recent years. We'll look at a concept of possible work-life integration over work-life balance, how you can achieve that integration in your life, and also if you're a leader leading teams, how you can achieve a work-life integration friendly environment in your team.
In fact, as you were saying that, I think a really a good question maybe to start off with as you're listening to this. When you think about your day, or when you think about your day now, is there a cut-off point? Can you honestly say there is a very distinct cut-off point? Because as you were sort of doing that introduction, I started thinking to myself, I remember a time when there was.
Yes.
There was I'm leaving work. Yeah. I'm leaving work.
And I can't actually think about it because I can think about it, but I can't be reached. I can't take it with me.
Well, we are blessed with, I certainly am, being old enough not to be using an iPhone or using a mobile device. In fact, even pre-laptop era. So
you are old.
Already old, right? So, okay. Right, I know, it's crazy, isn't it? Well, if you think about it, that was probably early 1990s.
Yeah,
we started walking around with laptops.
Yeah, I'm still from the day of internal mail.
There you go.
Yeah, no quick chats to your mates on the third floor. You had to actually get a lady with a trolley to deliver it to them. The
lady with the trolley coming round.
We had a tea trolley as well.
Jeez.
So I am also old.
So that kind of, we started our first business in 94. Late 80s was the internet, wasn't it? And early 90s, we started actually having these sort of mobile devices and carrying stuff. We had mobile phones, but they were mobile phones. They were for phone calls. They weren't for email and 24-hour connectivity. No. So there was a cut-off. There was a cut-off, and you thought, oh, good, thank goodness, another couple of hours to go and I'll be free. And I'm not saying that necessarily was like some relief to leave work, but
there was a certain drop of the shoulders.
There was indeed. There was we're going to be done and that's it, and I'll come back to it tomorrow. So that, some people listening to this was really, you can't even imagine a world. Was there a time in your life where there was a complete cut-off, and you can remember that? I certainly can, you can.
Yeah.
Maybe for other people, there's never been that cut-off.
No.
I mean, obviously it depends on what you're doing, and obviously our audience is typically a professional audience, and they're not kind of clocking in, clocking out. They take work home, or they might be expected, or at least feel expected to be able to respond to things.
And I don't know about you as well, because, then I feel like I did mentally clock off, to use that term. But because of the presence of technology and always keeping half an eye on what's going on email, it's much more difficult to, you might physically leave a space, but to mentally leave your work behind, I think, has become very difficult unless you pay attention and intentional attention to
exactly
it.
Exactly that. So this blurring of the lines that works never seems to completely, stop. I mean, there might be a kind of clear line between physically being, well, this is again another change, because we used to actually go to an office, sit at a desk, work with people in an office, and then leave at a certain time. And then you had the choice on whether you continue working.
Yeah.
Now, here we are, probably a large majority of people are probably spending 50, 60% of their time at home, or maybe, or vice versa at work. But that's a large percentage of your time where, the day just begins and doesn't really, end unless you decide there's going to be a cut-off point.
Yeah.
So, yes, a super topical point. The question is, what can we do about it? Does it really matter? I mean, does it matter to people? What do you think? I think it does.
Well, absolutely. And I think that it's the term has increased in its prominence, and people have been talking about it more for the past number of years. Because there's sort of a historical societal expectation that success comes with hours in the office. It's a good
Working
thing
hard.
to be the last person in the office, or to put the most hours in, or to be working harder. But I think that narrative is changing.
Well, I'm reminded that you say that about staying in longer hours in the office equals more likelihood of promotion. Seeing better and being seen to be more committed. I'm reminded of this gentleman who was telling me how he used to bring 2 jackets to work. One to hang on his desk and his chair at 6 or 6:30 at night, and one to take home. Right, to leave the desk all messy, give the impression
Light
he's
on.
actually still there. Light on, exactly, yeah. So yes, the pressure sometimes we actually put upon ourselves, the expectations that we have around being seen to be committed and working hard. What examples are you setting as a leader?
Yeah.
This is super critically important.
I think the narrative has started to shift, however, particularly post-pandemic, when people did have the opportunity maybe to blend more of their life activities with their working, within their working day. But the term work-life balance alludes to the fact that there's two opposite ends of the scale, and things can be totally imbalanced. But it also, to me, makes you think of the fact that one is good and the other is bad, and you have to get them in balance in order to mitigate the negative effects of work and balance it with what you want to do outside. But I just don't think that balance is achievable.
It's not. It's a myth. I mean, there's no, how many people do you meet that you can honestly say, balance suggests they're equal, doesn't it not? I think so.
Yes.
All right. Whereas really, it's what we should be, I think it's not work-life balance, it's life balance.
Yes.
Life balance is a better term, because you are making choices within your life depending on the circumstances. If you're in your 20s, single, hungry, motivated, love the job you're doing, you really enjoy it, and you get a great thrill from work. Why not? Why not spend more time? If you're finding something you love and you enjoy, and you have fun there, and maybe you have a bit of a social activity outside of work, alongside work. That I remember that in my 20s.
Brilliant times that
exactly.
You socialised and worked with the same group of people.
Yeah.
Now, day in, day out.
Wind the clock forward 10 years on, married, couple of young kids under 5. Suddenly we've got a whole different set of circumstances. Therefore, those shifts in your choices will change.
Yeah, balance then means different things to different people depending on where you are. But I think that it's a really good time for us to be having this conversation, particularly as organisations are starting to think, do we tell everyone to come back to the office? Do we strike some sort of flexible working, flexible balance? And I think that because people, there is this whole term of quiet quitting where, if organisations don't get this right and it doesn't meet the balance needs of individuals within the team, whatever they may be, then the quiet quitting, epidemic is costing the economy, billions and billions of pounds because people are doing just enough but not putting in that discretionary effort because the organisation isn't meeting the other needs that they have outside of the work that they do.
So they're kind of going through the motions.
Yeah.
They're not as motivated in the time they're working. It could be a lot of fillers, just filling up the time.
Yeah.
What we saw what we've seen in the last 5 years, in the pandemic years, was a huge societal change. And we've talked about this before on the podcast, and we've seen this many times in conversations with others, that it was like a sort of like a day of, reckoning, wasn't it? You're suddenly looking at your life and you're questioning what you're doing. You got jolted out of your pattern.
Yeah.
And suddenly you're looking at your life with a fresh set of ears and eyes. And you're suddenly thinking, actually, hold on a minute. Do I need to do this? Do I want to do this?
Yeah.
Do I have to do this? And rather than doing something you feel you ought to do, you're starting to exercise some choice over how you live your life.
Yeah, and it opened our eyes to other ways of potentially doing things. But I think that the narrative around work-life balance is unhelpful because it can lead to, if you don't feel like things are in balance and there is an equal balance between work and home, then it can lead to feelings of guilt and worry that you're not actually, things aren't in balance and I shouldn't be working as much or I shouldn't be taking time, for myself.
In the coaching I do, you can see the internal battle that people have between conflicting values. On one hand, they want to spend time with their family, do things for themselves, and when they're doing it, they're then feeling guilty about not fulfilling their work commitments.
Yeah.
And when they're with their work commitments, they're battling with feeling guilty about not being with their kids or their family or their partner, or being agitated and frustrated because they can't do some sport or something in the evening or whatever.
Yeah.
So the real answer to this question is not making one thing right, one thing wrong. First of all, to be able to step back and say, different things, different people, different stages of their life.
Yeah.
And as leaders or organisations, we need to respect those differences. And if somebody wants to further their career because they want to spend more hours and they think that will give them a better chance, then who are we to stop them and tell them what to do? But also, we shouldn't just see that as a measure of commitment.
No.
At all.
And I think that's one of the things that gets in the way of people taking the balance that they desire because they have difficulty saying no, because saying no might mean something. They think that what will others think of me if I am true to my values and I incorporate all the aspects of my life and my work that I want to. And so there's the feelings of guilt associated with that. And I think that's one of the things that gets in the way of people actually being honest and honouring their values and the things they want to do in work and outside of work. Worried about what people might think, worried about what a certain work pattern might mean in terms of their career aspirations and their career prospects, what their boss might think of them. Is their boss supportive of this, or not? So there's many things that can get in the way.
I'm reminded of one gentleman I was working with a few years back, and he was operations manager in a manufacturing site. And I was amazed but delighted with his philosophy towards the subject we're talking about. He explained to me he had 5 boys.
Wow.
Right, 5 boys. They were ranging from 3 up to 12 or something like that, ish. And he had this policy of leaving work every day at 5 p.m. And I thought, wow, that's really impressive, I mean, he got there fairly early in the morning. And I said, well, how do you manage that? Being a senior, he was the senior operations manager.
Yeah. Brilliant.
And he said, well, first of all, my values around spending time with my kids while I can are very high. And I explained to the company when I first took on the role, this is a condition. right? I will leave work each day at 5 p.m. I will go home and I'll spend time with my kids and I'll, put them to bed or whatever. I'll be part of that family thing. But I'll be available again later on. I'll make myself available. I answer emails, questions, queries, around 8:30, 9 o'clock for an hour or whatever it is. That was his routine. So what he's doing is he's putting the big rock in first, as we talked about before. He's signaling to people, this is important to me. Everybody knows that's the way he lives his life, and they accepted it and they work around it.
It's interesting.
So that's I don't know, some people might listen to say, well, is that really scalable? I don't know. I'm not here necessarily to argue whether it is or isn't. But the point is that when you are clearer about what's important to you around your choices, and you communicate them, and look, it has to be economical. You can't choose, to work in a business that is 24/7, or my son's a chef. You can't just announce that he needs to go home at 7 o'clock every evening when most of your customers are coming in. Exactly, and you're making a choice. You're making a choice ahead of time. I remember talking to a group of investment bankers. Well, these were sort of the executive assistants, group of executive assistants, and I think there was some HR people in there as well, for these investment bankers. And there was a real split opinion in the room. They were talking about exactly this subject and how hard they were having to work. And some of them were saying that their bosses, really weren't being respectful to their time and making way too many demands on them. And another group of people were saying, well, I don't really think that's not really a problem for me. And when we delved a bit deeper, what was quite clear is that the people that were having a hard time, simply the biggest difference was there was no sort of contracting, if you like, with their boss.
And they probably just, we know that we teach people how to treat us, and the absence of any sort of agreement around boundaries or desires or values or anything like that, then the work will just keep coming. And if you keep doing it and not say anything, then maybe the boss isn't the issue.
That's the point,
the
right?
Conversation is the issue.
There was no contracting. They felt that there was no sort of respect, but they were in some ways they were slightly unrealistic also about the environment they're working in. I mean, they had chosen a job in investment banking in the city. It's aggressive. It's the way it is. It's not going to change for you. I'm not excusing it, but I'm saying that pick your lane. If that environment, fast-moving, high demand, high performance, generally highly paid, if that's not an environment you don't want to be in, then I think you need to make choices around that ahead of time. The other folks, by the way, the one difference there is that they had contracted with their leaders, and they had some clear boundaries, but they weren't inflexible to say, I'm not going to cross those at ever time, but they were controlling it.
Yeah.
And so that if they did push it too far, they would say, right, no, that's enough. So,
and I think that that's the essence of what we're advocating for, as opposed to work-life balance, is actually work-life integration or life balance. And Better Up, the coaching organisation, they talk about the whole person model and advocating for organisations to think about the whole person that shows up at work and encourage individuals to really think about their values and what's important to them, and design a way of working that actually meets that, which helps them create the I mean, I don't really like the word boundaries because but I like what you said about sort of a contract, if you like, an understanding between a group of people that work together that can embrace the needs of everybody within that.
And recognising also that, unless the investment banker, you've had that conversation with them, they will default to being, these guys, guys and girls are earning a fortune. And they have quite an aggressive mindset. They have a work full-on mindset all the time. And if you don't remind them that, you might be earning millions, but I'm not, and we're doing different jobs here, have the conversation. In all these examples I'm sort of providing here, there is a proactivity on the part of the person, not to be reactive. but to decide ahead of time what is ideal for you. What time do you feel comfortable in terms of, your circumstance allow you to get into work, to start work, to finish work? Remembering that, we ultimately, what we're interested in is results. How somebody gets that results, how somebody arrives at those results. People might do it in different ways. I've always, believed, and we've talked about this before, that, maximize productivity by playing to your circadian rhythms.
Yeah.
Are you a morning lark, or are you a night owl? When do you do your most productive work? And organize your life around being productive.
And
making those choices.
I think it is a mindset shift, is a massive mindset shift from the traditional 9 to 5, or 8 till midnight, ways of working. But it's understanding that rhythm and not being, if you want to start at 8 o'clock and go and take a 2-hour walk in nature at lunchtime and work a bit later, the rise of flexible working actually gives us the opportunity to do that more. But it's about being intentional. It's about, like you said, identifying what those big rock things are. No one's going to do it for you. And even if you're operating in an environment where you do have to be in an office and work, you have set work hours, you can still incorporate balance within those work hours.
It's because it's about honouring the business you're with.
Yeah.
If every Tuesday afternoon there is a major project meeting and you're saying, actually, I want to take my walk at that time, that's probably not being realistic. So there are certain things where there's a bit of give and take, but what you're trying to do is exercise and choice in 70% of your time. But being flexible in those other times where you might have to, give a little bit to meet the demands of the business that is actually paying your income.
Yeah.
If you're running a business, I have to make commitments.
Yeah.
We both have to make commitments that actually, might run against some of the choices ideally we'd like to make because that's the demand of the business.
But that in this life integration model, that big rock of the project meeting, that is one of the big rocks. The project meeting is one of the big rocks that you have to accommodate, as well as the other rocks that you might have traditionally seen as work on one side, life on the other.
There is no question that we are experiencing a shift in what the different generations would like to see.
Yeah.
And with more and more millennials and more Generation X moving into leadership positions, I read I was having a conversation with a partner from a professional services firm. We were talking about this topic, and he signalled me to an article actually in the Times. I'm just referencing it here. Very recently, literally last week. And the title is "Goodbye Boomers, There's a New Generation in Charge."
Oh, harsh.
So, X marks the spot for 1965, 1979. This is our Gen X generation. And not surprising, they have quite a different approach to, that is likely to lead to societal changes. And what they're talking about here is, for a long time, baby boomers have dominated Britain's cultural, political and economic landscape. After decades in charge, new research confirms the post-war generation is losing its grip on power, and Gen X is taking over.
Ooh, that's me.
That's you. I'm baby boomer, you see. I'm out.
See ya.
Yeah. 3/4, this is interesting, 3/4 of cabinet ministers and 4 in 5 chief executives now hail from Generation X. Those born between 65 and 79. And the study says they have a very different approach to life that could lead to significant societal changes. So we take the current government, the recently voted in Labour government, Keir Starmer. So Keir Starmer was born in 62. He would certainly qualify as a baby boomer. The Chancellor, Home Secretary, Foreign Secretary, all now come from Gen X, as do most of the Labour front bench.
Yeah.
So what does this really mean? What does this mean for the way, I know you read quite a bit about this. What does this really mean for their outlook?
So Gen X, and increasingly so with millennials and Gen Z, the value that they place on markers of success that are less traditional in terms of work achievements and positions of hierarchy and that sort of thing in organisations. They're much more focused on things like, time with friends and family. They're prioritising health much more than maybe the baby boomers did. Seeking work that's purposeful, so not just about career progression, but something that fulfills them from a sense of purpose and to the greater good, looking for organisations that support their values around the environment and corporate
CSR,
social responsibility. So I think that shift is a good thing, and I think it will just continue going in that direction. So this debate, well, actually, it's probably now that we're having that change, because there is a shift where we're sort of straddling the two mindsets, aren't we? But in the future, life integration will just be the way things are done. Because I think there is a whole movement towards much more of that side of things.
I think the key thing there is that the work doesn't necessarily sit at the centre of their life, is part of their life.
Yeah.
This does create challenges for leaders. If you're a baby boomer and you've been brought up in a society where you just did whatever it takes to get to the next level. Yeah. I certainly have had plenty of conversations with leaders in the last few months in talking about complexities of leading a multi-generational workforce, where on one hand, you've got an ethos of high work ethic, do whatever it takes, get the job done, sacrifice things in the short term for supposed happiness in the long term. That might be a bit of a myth in itself. But, do whatever it takes now to get what you want in the future. Whereas this society is saying, no, I want to make the journey a little bit more enjoyable. But this can cause difficulties for leaders, because if you're from a mindset that says that you just you do what needs to be done to get to where you want to go, depending on who that leader is in charge and the value they're placing on hard work and commitment, versus somebody that and you're not doing that, or you're being seen to be almost putting your own wishes ahead of the organ, or at least it'll appear that way. You're putting your own wishes ahead of the organisation. Yeah, I've talked to lots of leaders about this and said, you can make them wrong all day long. Who's to say they're right? Who's to say we're wrong and they should live their life in the way that we do? But there's a balance there. Yeah. Sometimes that can get pushed too far, and I have definitely been party to conversations where there is very little economical sense in what somebody is asking for. If they were actually running the company and they wanted those conditions that they're asking for, it wouldn't be sustainable. No. So there is a sort of a balance here on both sides. I think it's a big challenge. So let's move to some practical things that people can do to achieve what we're describing as life balance, not work-life balance.
So I think the first thing, and we've talked about it previously in this conversation, but it's just becoming aware of the things that are important to you. So we called them big rocks, the things that you value spending your time in. Because if you understand those things, then you can be much more intentional about building those things in.
Honouring, I think, the values exercise we do around personal values, work values, what do you really value? Yeah. And then honour them, because if you don't honour them, you're always going to feel frustrated, you're going to feel unhappy, you're not going to feel satisfied, you're going to feel far more motivated, you're living a life consistent with your personal values. Yeah, absolutely. There's a model that's been around for many years. It's really quite a healthy thing to do. You call the wheel of life. And you simply imagine a spoked wheel, and you could have 7 or 8 spokes to that wheel, and you can name the spokes whatever you want. I mean, typically people will have career. They might have something around health, learning, family, Sorry?
Relationships.
Yeah, family, relationships. They might have a role in the community, a role of contribution. They might be doing something more spiritual. So it's anything in your life that is a, father, mother, family member or whatever. So think about the main things, like the hats you wear across a week. And then determine, if you were giving a sort of scale of 1 to 10, how much time and effort you're putting, or how much time an emphasis, your value you're placing on that. And then look to see, then join the dots up and see what kind of shape the wheel looks like.
Yeah.
And then say, well, okay, is this sustainable for me? Is this making me happy? What changes could I realistically make, right? Can I move the career spoke down a bit, or do I need to move it up a bit? And make those adjustments.
Yeah.
So that's a very powerful exercise to do.
And another exercise, well, not an exercise, but one of the questions that we ask people, particularly around the values exercise, if you're saying you value your health, what are you doing day in and day out that will show me that you value your health? And quite often people are like, well, I've put it on a piece of paper, but I'm not actually living in alignment with that value. So it's about setting goals that work holistically, the whole person model, as we mentioned before. I think that, the other thing is just, in terms of your routine, obviously working in the ecology of the environment and the context that you're operating in, just think about, is this the only way of doing things, or how can I build some flexibility in so that I can bring in other aspects of the things that I value into a traditional working day, which might be prioritizing a gym class, for example, in the middle of the day, or taking a walk in nature, or finishing a little bit earlier. And then maybe, like the example you used of that leader, you might value getting home and spending some time with your kids, but you clock on and do a couple of hours later on, because that works in the ecology and
it's interesting to see what happens a lot in Northern Europe, where light levels go down much quicker. And, it's not uncommon in the Nordics for people to leave work earlier because of the light levels, and then actually, get the kids to bed or whatever, spend time with the family, and then work later on. So it's all a balance of making sure you're meeting you've got to be economically viable.
Yeah.
Okay, you can't just sort of go, well, I don't have any, I'm just going to do what I want. You've got to, use the word ecological just now. It is about making sure it's an ecological system that all things fit together. Will they work? Is this ecologically sustainable?
Yeah.
Will I remain healthy? Will I have good relationships if I carry on this way? I was having a conversation yesterday, not an untypical conversation, with an executive. Arrives in the office at 7, probably a little bit earlier. Rarely leaves before 7.
Yeah.
Works on the weekends. I get that, as a senior executive, that is quite a high demand. But guess what happened? He ran into problems, and he has a very high work ethic, but he suffered as a result, and he had to make some changes to his lifestyle. Our Power Up podcast is all about people happily achieving, not just achieving to be happy. So making choices that we don't like to be, we're not kind of like in the hippie farm here, sitting on a mountain saying do exactly what you want when you want. There is a pragmatic economic viability to the choices that you can make. So we want to counter this.
Yeah.
But don't get caught in the trap of thinking that you can't exercise some choices to happily achieve, like this executive, be an example to others, have great success in your life, and 20, 30 years later, still be really healthy.
Yeah.
And not just kind of all used up because you've squashed you spent half your life just trying to achieve and make money. Because
you assume that's the only way. You know, there are other ways of achieving that. I think another thing that, people can do is make sure that, because there's a tendency for to-do lists just to focus on what you need to do for work in a day. But I put personal things that I need to do in that day, because they are as important as all of those things. And I do love a list. So, you know, to get to cross that off as well is very, very satisfying.
And the best thing you could do to finish up, I think, is to be, as you said earlier, be a life balance friendly leader. Set an example for other people. This is the greatest way. I mean, if you want cultural change, you want a healthy culture. All cultures are a balance of performance, enjoyment, and learning.
Yeah.
And if you imagine like a triangle and you've got an emphasis only on performance, but it's over, people aren't enjoying themselves, you will end up losing people, particularly in the world we are today.
Yeah.
Where people are exercising their choice and have more confidence in exercising that choice. So be an example, you know, to other people. There are some great books on this subject. One of my favourite books, if anybody's sort of going through change in their life, is a book called Life Launch, which beautifully describes life in chapters and typical things we do between 20 and 30, 30, 35, 30 and 40 and so forth. Highly recommend that. Great exercises in there so that you can get your own kind of moral compass in order.
And we'll put links to those, you know, in the show notes as well.
It's an ongoing subject. This podcast is all about exercising your personal power to live a life that you feel happy with living.
Yeah.
And don't live it out of the rule book of someone else.
Yeah, blindly, you know, without challenging that there might be another way, you know, and it's all about getting clear yourself and then having those conversations and you know, coming to an agreement with other people.
So wishing every listener a life balanced life, whatever that is for you.
A beautifully balanced,
yes, absolutely. Make those choices, exercise those choices, communicate those choices to people, and you will find that people will respect them. And guess what? If they don't, or maybe you're in the wrong company with the wrong people. So be brave and maybe make some changes.
Yeah. And good luck.
And good luck,
And let us know how you get on.
Yeah.
We'd love to hear how people are getting on with some of these things.
We'd love to hear stories of people who've exercised these choices or made changes for bettering their life.
Yeah.
Particularly where performance and happiness and health combine together.
Yeah.
That holistic approach, one should not be at the expense of the other.
Until next time.
Yeah. Have a great time.
Yeah.